it's got a full bright battery. So check, check, 1, 2.
Do you want this? I can move it out of the way.
Yeah, no, that's great. Right there's great. Then I have a couple of things that I'll reference. Great. Thank you. Everything is falling apart today.
We got one copy.
Right? The heat wasn't working. There was no heat. Yeah. Yeah. But we're like you. We've been really warm in the Bay Area. And you know, those fires too. We canceled practice for a week. It was really bad. Kids with asthma. Notre Dame, the process was to come out and they just canceled their trip.
Yep.
Yeah.
This is
This is good.
yeah, this is 10 or 12 per school, which is
Yeah.
like our basketball, girls basketball playing.
Oh wow. For playoffs?
Boys basketball.
No.
Oh, they're already?
Girls basketball. It's a scrimmage tonight.
Oh, okay.
Boys basketball has a county coaches meeting. So yeah. Do you want all the coaches to just kind of do we have 10 minutes to introduce themselves?
No, I don't think we want to do that.
Want to do that?
No, that's way.
Put a name and face.
No.
Is there any
Interaction?
interactions?
There
to
is.
that?
Mhm. Yep.
There's 60 people.
Yeah, they don't care enough. They really don't. I mean, in theory, it's nice, but
No. My phone, I left it at home today, so I've been all day.
when you need a timer.
I just know what time it is because I want to start
it
on time. We told them 7 to 9, so
Okay,
you got
okay.
plenty
No
of time.
problem.
I'm going to get started. Good evening, everyone. Mindful of your time, we're going to go ahead and get started here this evening. There is a handout that we put on the chairs, though, as you came in. Hopefully you grabbed one. If not, feel free to jump up. Welcome to Roncalli. My name is Chuck Weisenbach. I serve as principal here, and on behalf of all of us in the Circle City Conference, thank you very, very much for coming this evening and giving up of your time. Appreciate it immensely. Some housekeeping items. We do have restrooms right outside in the lobby. Men's would be out and to your left as you exit. Women's would be out and to your right. Snacks and drinks are out there. Please help yourself to those. Make yourself feel comfortable and welcome. If your day started with prayer, we'd like to maybe just pause and put ourselves in the presence of God and then begin our program this evening with prayer as well. In the name of the Father, Son, and Holy Spirit, amen. Heavenly Father, we come to you this evening with a heart that is filled with thanksgiving. Thank you for the blessings that you continue to bring into our life. We're especially grateful for your Son, Jesus, and for the unconditional love and mercy that he extends to us every day. We're grateful for all of our schools, especially the young people that come to us every day. We're especially grateful for their parents who entrust them to us every day. Lord, we thank you for our coaches. They have a mighty task in front of them. It's become quite challenging, but we know there's great fulfillment to be found in the world of coaching. So we ask your blessings upon them, those who have finished their seasons, those who will still go through their seasons, Lord. Bless them, bless their efforts, and bless their work so that it would be pleasing to you and might help build up the kingdom. And we ask all of this in Christ's name. Amen. In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit, amen. One quick editorial comment. Hey, how about the Circle City Conference? Congratulations on a great, great, great fall. Some of you have completed seasons and done so in dynamite fashion. We have a number of Circle City Conference teams still competing in the state tournaments. So super, super fall season. Thank you to all of our fall sport coaches here for a great job. And I know we've got a girls basketball scrimmage tonight, so winter sports is already up and running, and looking forward to some great winter sports as well. Our guest speaker tonight, Ann Strickers, teaches theology and coaches girls golf at St. Ignatius College Prep in San Francisco. In 2009, Ann created a blog and a theology course entitled Sports and Spirituality. With her students and athletes, she hopes to instill a deep and real love for God. Ann believes sports can build community and reveal the beauty of the human spirit. She was a 4-year member of the row team at the University of Notre Dame. Ann has completed 3 marathons, biked across the state of Iowa, and enjoys watching high school basketball, Notre Dame football, professional golf and tennis, as well as other live sporting events. She's always working on lowering her golf index. She has spoken on the topic of sports and spirituality throughout the country. She came to our attention last year when we had some of our own coaches attend the National Catholic Educators Conference in St. Louis, came back raving about her presentation and therefore the contact. So we're delighted to welcome, I guess, back to Indiana and to our Circle City Conference tonight, Ann Strickers.
Okay, hi everybody. Good to be here. Good to be with you. Thanks, Chuck. Chuck was really made so much effort and energy to bring me here from San Francisco to be with you in Indy today. Today, what we're going to talk about is the spirituality of coaching. I have coached, so I've worked at my school, St. Ignatius SI. I've been there 15 years, and I would think in that time, one of my the areas that I've just grown to love more, one of the roles of my school is as a coach. So thank you all for coming tonight. And I don't know what sports we have out there. I'll try to talk about a variety of different sports. But specifically your role as a coach, and then things that you can do with your athletes to help them in terms of this type of growth, which I consider spiritual growth. Okay, so just our agenda, and there is a handout that just kind of echoes this, and there'll be some reflection questions and some ideas that I'm going to have you to consider and maybe talk to somebody 5 seats away from you, or, if we can at some point talk to another person. But in addition to this being a photo of something I'll never do in my lifetime, I like to just think about images or sports that just speak to us about the capacity and ability of the human body, right? And wow, just that when we lift our eyes up and we see something incredible. So let's begin. Tonight, what we'll be looking at is, hopefully my clicker will work. Hasn't been great. Sports and spirituality, sports specifically as a spiritual endeavor, coaching as a spiritual endeavor. And if that's all true, so what? What does that mean for us here? Okay, and what we can do. Okay, so this class that I created, so we have senior electives. Seniors take 2 different electives, and the class I was teaching was kind of a spirituality class. And in order to talk about the spiritual life, I found myself quite a bit referencing sports, right? Trying to give examples, kind of trying to ground something that would be ephemeral or just, right, not necessarily elusive, but the spiritual life sometimes needs some grounding. And so I found myself talking about sports and reading enough that I felt like there were some connections that could be made and we could pursue these ideas and have some fun with them. So this is the cover of my reader. So I created a textbook, and on the first day of class, I just asked my students, is this spiritual? Why or why not? Okay. And so it's actually part of a poster. Some of you may have seen it. It was an ad campaign by Nike. I don't tell them that, right? But some of them know that. And there's the line, "We are all witnesses," right? And that implies something, right? We're witnesses to, that's spoken in the Acts of the Apostles about Jesus, right? The apostles have seen Jesus Christ, and therefore they have an obligation to kind of spread the word. But then, we're witnesses to this talent, to this ability, this athlete, LeBron James. It's funny because in the time that I've taught the course, he was in Cleveland, and then he left, and then he's back. And then living in the Bay Area, we're Golden State fans, so LeBron has, an interesting character in like the Bay Area in general. So every year it takes on new life and new responses. But that's what I get to talk about on a regular basis with students, sports and spirituality. Okay. And I think when I encountered this quote, it invited me to kind of think about it in a theological context, because as Ron Rolheiser says, God speaks to every element in the language it can understand. So whatever it is that we love and we're passionate about, that's how God reaches us. So Catholicism is really open to this idea of analogy, that we can kind of come to know something, right, like God through comparison. So I always say, I'd love to teach a class, spirituality and rock and roll. As someone who's seen Bruce Springsteen 23 times, I could probably really do that quite effectively. My mom would like spirituality and gardening, right? There's really some analogies there that you can kind of come close to this understanding of the spiritual life. But it just so happens the language that I speak is sport. So that's what I get to teach about and talk about. I think that was a language that I came to speak naturally, like maybe some people in this room. And it's through family examples, and the gifts of my parents gave me the opportunity to play sports. But I want to just begin with this medal. It's a medal that I wear, and it's a medal I always wear when I speak about sports and spirituality. Some of you heard this a little earlier, but my mom's parents were both from Ireland. They both left for different circumstances. My grandfather really had to leave. He was so poor, he had to leave and pursue opportunity here. When he left, he never went back. He never really talked about his upbringing. He was a very private person. And when he died, my aunt and my mom found in his drawer this medal. And on the back of it is his name, Michael John Naughton. And it says 1919, 400 yards, in Ireland, the yards. And he was the All-Ireland champion. And I wish I had heard about his experience as a runner. He never talked about his success as a runner. He never, that was totally news to us. About 6 months after he died, the movie Chariots of Fire came out. And that is the story of Eric Liddell, right? And he runs for Scotland, or for the Crown, Great Britain, and he has this conscience qualm because he doesn't want to run on the Sabbath. But he has this beautiful quote. He says, "God has made me for a purpose. He's made me fast, and when I run, I feel his pleasure." And I thought, that's exactly what spirituality is to me, that God has made us and has made us with our own unique gifts and talents. And he's made us for a purpose. And when we use them, we glorify him and we feel God's pleasure. The odds are my grandfather would have actually run against Eric Liddell at some point, because they have these tribe contests, like Ireland, Scotland, and maybe England or Wales. But we wouldn't know. So someday in eternal life, I look forward to seeing my grandpa again, and I'm going to ask him if he ran against Eric Liddell, and the same of Mr. Liddell. And the other thing I would say is about my grandfather is he, even though I don't remember him that much, my mom said he looked at runners with this knowledge of good form. He understood running. He obviously was a runner, so he would have known that, but he never talked about it. That's my mom's side of the family. They didn't really talk about sports. Okay. On the other side of the family, the paternal side, my grandfather, Ed Strickers, and my uncle, Jay, is in the middle here. Okay. Jay was a Pac-12 referee. He's now in the replay booth. He was a Pac-12 referee for 35 years, so we love the zebra. We have respect for officials because a lot of them are in my family. So all my family ever does is talk about sports on the Strickers side, so you can kind of guess which side won out. Therefore, that's my language. It's kind of funny. There's a fake Twitter profile of my Uncle Jay, and I was playing golf one time, and this guy says, "Oh, your name's Ann Strickers? There's this guy, Glasses Ref. Is that your husband?" And I'm like, "That's my uncle," but that's okay. So it's just a mockery kind of on officiating, but that's the Stricker side. So we'll talk a lot about different sports tonight. Okay. So I want to begin kind of with the story then of how thinking about sports and spirituality, but then specifically writing about it and where we're going with tonight's talk, things that you can do kind of evolved. I listen to sports talk radio in the morning, specifically our local radio station is KNBR, Murph and Mac. I mean, there's a lot of people call in. And, if you listen regularly, there's certain personalities you like, right? There's certain callers that you notice what they say, you appreciate their insights, their content. Like John Lynch is new to the Bay Area as their GM of the Niners. I really like him. We're still trying to get a win, but, I appreciate what these people have to offer. And Casey Martin was a golfer at Stanford. He was on Tiger Woods' team, and he called in to kind of talk about his life story. He kind of has an interesting life story. And he coaches at the University of Oregon, where he's from, Eugene. And he talked about his faith. And he talked about it in a way that was very different than ways I've heard people talk about their faith before. For me, sometimes it can be a little bit sometimes just too strong or too much. And everybody's different in how we kind of hear others talk about their faith. But with Casey, it was real. Like, it felt like authentic, and it stopped me on my morning commute, and I wanted to know more, and I wanted to know more about his story. And as fate would have it, one of my own students was kind of being recruited by Casey to play at Oregon, and kind of said in passing in class, he's like, "Hey, Miss Striggers, my grandpa's going to a lunch today. Casey Martin's the keynote speaker." And I just kind of thought, that's interesting. Well, I went to the Stanford Oregon basketball game that night, and I wanted to write about him. At that point, I kind of knew about his story. And I'm walking out of Maples Pavilion, and there he is. I couldn't believe it. Like, this person that I wanted to talk to about his faith and his experience in sports, and there he was. 12,000 people, right? I mean, I've tried to run into people before, but there he was. It was just like, Bichette. It was meant to be. But sure. So sure enough, I said, I would really like to interview you. I have a blog. It's about sports and spirituality. And he said, anytime. He's like, we'll be back in the Bay Area. Here's my email. Give me a call. And that was my first article that got published, right? That interaction with Casey, all of that, and his famous quote from our interview was, "God has been awesomely gracious to me." And who says that, right? What a beautiful response. He's had some personal physical challenges, but what a beautiful kind of outlook on life. That's really what kind of made way for my book that I'll be kind of sharing ideas from that hopefully you can use with your athletes, called Pray and Practice with Purpose. And that's a playbook for the spiritual development of athletes. So that's kind of how we got where we are today. Okay, so let's begin. The first part I want to think of is just the idea of spirituality. I've already talked about that term a lot and what that might mean, but I like to give some teeth to it. And maybe some ways that are a little bit different than you've considered before. Okay, so my first part is identity. Okay, I'm going to talk about sports as identity, tension, and vision. We'll see how these work together. Okay, identity. So Jesus, this is my favorite image of Christ, this icon. It has two different eyes, if you can see that. Right? One is the human eye, and one is the divine eye. And I always let my students try to figure out which side is which. Okay? But Jesus sees us through both eyes, the human and divine. And he asked this question of his disciples: who do people say that I am? Right? And when he asked this question, they say, some say Elijah, others say John the Baptist, still others say X, Y, Z. But Jesus turns it around. He says, that's not what I'm worried about. Who do you say that I am? And to me, that question's about relationship. Like, literally, who am I to you? And I think for working with young people in our sport, it's really important to help them grow and understand their identity. We play a huge part in that. Okay? So I want to use an example of how that might work in sports. This is a picture of Zena Garrison I went to the Bank of the West Tennis Classic. It's at Stanford. And she's a champion, right, 87, 89. And I looked at Miss Garrison, and I saw something of myself, okay, up close. I looked at her closely, and it was like I understood something about her that would be unsuspecting to most people. The only thing that we might have in common is that we both play tennis, right? Our backgrounds are different, our races are different, we both love tennis. But what I saw, what really stopped me, was that she was wearing this necklace, right? It's of a gold tennis racket. And for some reason, I thought that was funny because she's a professional tennis player. Everybody knows that she's playing tennis. Like, why is she wearing a tennis racket? Well, I totally get that because when I was in high school, all I wanted people to know about me was that I played tennis. I loved tennis. I always say it was my first love. I didn't subscribe to one tennis magazine. I subscribed to two. I was a ball girl, right? My best friends played tennis, right? Boys played tennis. I babysat so that I could go to tennis camps. I just loved the game. I loved it. And this is a picture from high school with like one of my closest friends. And I actually think this picture is really important for me to remember because I don't like it, but part of it is that I'm totally out of dress code, okay? Which is really inappropriate. I'm not even wearing, I went to Carondelet, that's the name of my high school. I'm not even wearing the Carondelet tennis t-shirt. And I get upset with my students sometimes, or my athletes, right? I coached cross country and we would have girls that would wear lacrosse, like SI lacrosse stuff. And we're like, you're not on lacrosse, like you need to be wearing cross country. But here I am doing the same thing, right? But tennis was a huge part of my identity. And it really, it formed my friendships and what I loved. It's what I wanted people to know about me. So one of the things I try to remember is as much as I love tennis, I was on the track team. Now, I liked track. I didn't love it in the same way that I love tennis, all right? I was part of it, and I was shaped by it, and I was formed by it. So I have this spectrum of a sport where I wanted everyone to know that, but then I was part of another sport where it was big, it was what I did, but it didn't matter that that was part of my identity. And it resonates with this picture of a couple of my golf girls, okay? On the left here is Grace. Grace wants to play golf and tennis. She wants to play golf in college. She's an excellent golfer, very strong. Everything she wants you to know about her is that she plays golf. Next to Grace is Caitlin. Caitlin's wearing a flower crown, which isn't necessarily a prerequisite for playing golf, right? But Caitlin would be somebody who identifies as a girl who plays golf. She's not necessarily a golfer. She's a girl who plays golf. And on the right is somebody in between, Rachel. Rachel came to golf a little bit later. She kind of grew to love it. So I think on our teams, sometimes it's important to know that we have swimmers and we have kids that swim and we have kids in between. We're working with all of them, right? As their identity, their emerging identity, and helping them get to know who they are. Okay. Our next kind of piece for spirituality is vision. Right? So spiritual life requires a certain vision, or as Richard Rohr says here, spirituality is about seeing. It's not about earning or achieving. It's about relationship rather than results or requirements. Once you see, the rest follows. Okay? This suggests a couple of things to me, right? In order to see things spiritually, right, we have to do a couple things. Maybe we need to figure out what we're looking for, right? Maybe it's contingent on these relationships, or that we can train the eye to see. Now, I don't know a sport where keeping your eye on the ball isn't important, right? Fundamentally, you have to keep your eye on the ball. We always say that, right? It helps. So seeing really is an advantage in sport. We have to be able to see, have a sense of the court, the field, right? So spirituality is about seeing, and seeing is an advantage. Now, I always think of Andre Agassi. I read his autobiography, Open, and I think it taught a really good lesson about the importance of seeing. Agassi is known as the best return. He has the best return of serve in the game. So, I think he's top 10 all time, but his return of serve is his mark of excellence. Agassi probably has 20/12 vision. He didn't say that, but he had the uncanny ability in one of his opponents, Boris Becker, who would serve over 140 miles an hour. If Becker's eyes shifted to the right, Becker would serve to the ad side of the court. If they shifted to the other side, he knew he would serve down the middle. Agassi literally had an advantage in terms of seeing, right? It helped him be prepared for the game that was at hand. Seeing is an advantage. How can we equip the kids that we work with to see something different in their sport? Now, one thing I like about this metaphor, though, is, for us to think about this idea of seeing in a different way. Chris Mullin, Golden State Warrior, talked about the college days of playing with Mark Jackson, right? And then when they were reunited here in Indy, he said, "Oh, I can't wait to play with him again." It's there's going to be a lot of no-look passes. Right? We know each other really well. The no-look pass is back. And I thought about that idea, right? A no-look pass is only completed because of a couple things. Trust in your teammate and awareness of where he or she is on the court, right? Kind of a sense, carrying out a play, right? And when you have the no-look, you're actually not looking at the person you're getting the ball from, right? Your eye is on the hoop or something else. Your vision is focused on one thing, but you're using your other abilities to sense or understand something. And I think that's an interesting way to think about spirituality, right? Like, we're intuiting things all the time. We're trusting others. We have committed to a play. We have come to kind of understand, right, so that we can complete something. Great way to think about spirituality. Okay? And so I think part of our jobs, like I said, is to help the kids we work with train their eyes to see something different, if that's something we can do. I think that's what's great about our sports is that it enables kids to take their experience of a sport and it can extend beyond, right, the sport itself. So I'll use my example. Sorry for non-golfers. I didn't start playing golf till later. So, I learned a couple of things as an adult about seeing the world through the lens of golf. Now, the easy things would be something like, in golf, you're not supposed to grip too tight, right? You want to kind of hold like a bird in your hand. Or you should be concerned about alignment, right? Or where's the target, right? And if you miss, it's because maybe something, your stance is off. So those are great metaphors for life in general too, right? My grip, you can't hold on to anything too tight. Always check your alignment, right? What's your target, right? But I'd like to go a little deeper with that, okay? One of the things about golf is that in golf, a negative is a positive, right? -1 is a birdie, -2, the eagle, -3 for 1 in 10 million people, it happens. It's called an albatross. A negative is a positive. The lower your score, the better. Sometimes in life, right, they call it addition by subtraction. When we take things away, it's actually better, right? So certain things that we can take away in our own life, maybe it's physically, materially, whatever we're trying to clear out, a negative can be a positive. Golf has invited me to consider that. The next example. One thing that's weird or interesting about golf is that there's no defense in the sport. So I love like defense and how that's carried out in sports, but in golf, that's just not part of the game, right? So in basketball, tennis, any sport where you're having to read your opponent, that's not how it works. And I think of like Jordan Spieth gives Jason Day, a thumbs up at the PGA Championship for a really great 17-foot lag putt. It costs Jordan Spieth nothing to do that. It doesn't make his game any worse or better by supporting his opponent, right? And it's not common, but in our lives, there's times where we just don't need to play defense, right? So I'm a teacher. I work with like 5 other teachers with the subject I teach. To say that Miss Vanderpool's class is good, it doesn't cost me anything. She's my colleague. We can support each other. It's not me against her, right? So much of our world is competitive, but there's certain things where why can't we just mutually support each other? There's no defense in that. It's kind of fun to think about, okay? And the last one is this. The team is never just you. Whenever Jordan Spieth makes a mistake, he says, I. And whenever things go well, he says, we. Some people don't like that he says we. They kind of think of it as this royal we. But I know where it's coming from. He's talking about his caddy, Michael Greller, or his coach, or his family. I believe it. I don't think anything that we achieve individually is ever just us. I think it's others that support us and get us there. To me, the team is never just you. I realize he's the one making it happen, but I just choose to see it differently. Or maybe there's a higher power. This is Justin Thomas at the PGA Championship. Oh, sound.
Joking. Look at that. It's another one dimple.
It's gone.
Oh my
It's
goodness!
gone. Yes.
In your life, have you ever seen anything like that, Vern?
I just love it, right? Sometimes the team is a higher force, I think, right? All right. So moves us to our third definition with spirituality. So we have vision, we have identity, and now I'd like for us to think about this idea of tension. It's an interesting way to think about spirituality, is tension. Okay, but I say it because of this. This is Larry Gillick. He's a Jesuit at Creighton, and he gave a great definition of spirituality. He said, spirituality is living with the tensions of your beliefs. He said religious beliefs, right? There's things that we believe and hold as true, but that doesn't mean that they don't challenge us or push us. And he says spirituality is kind of working through that challenge, right? It's evidence. We can see, right? When there's tension, you can see it. And he says, that's spirituality. That's a spirit. That's something that's alive, awake, and it's moving. And I thought about that idea of tension because Ignatius of Loyola writes a lot about it in his exercises. He says, if there's tension in your faith life, in your spiritual life, he says, stay with the tension. The temptation is always to get rid of it, right? To do away, to just put it down. And he says, no, that's not the point. Stay with it. And I thought, well, yeah, I get that because that's exactly what a weight room is all about, right? The only way to get stronger in a weight room, right, is to work with the tension. So think of like an upright row, right? You can just pull it up, but yeah, the idea is that you're really working with that tension in order to grow stronger, right? And you can throw it down or you can put it down, right? Or you can have small weights or bigger weights, but the idea is working with that tension, and that can lead to growth. And in that way, I think it can lead to spiritual growth. And so I was kind of struck by Maria Sharapova. I like the Players Tribune. I don't know if people read it. Just an announcement, if it's something you're interested in or haven't heard about. It's created by Derek Jeter, and it's online articles written by the athletes themselves. I think there's a lot of ghostwriting, but it's firsthand narratives from the athletes, kind of stories that they offer. And this was Maria Sharapova. Some of you know she tested positive for methadone, so she was suspended for 15 months. And this is kind of her experience of coming back from that. And she said something that I thought kind of resonated with this idea of tension. She said, I realized that as much as I yearned while I was gone for the comfort and routine of my old life as a tennis player, what I yearned for even more was the discomfort. I yearned for the feeling that tennis gives you of, it's hard for me here to think of just the right phrase. Maybe it's tough love, how tennis will isolate you, exhaust you, wear you down, test your resolve in some of the most brutal ways possible. But if you can just make it through, then it will also reward you in ways that are beyond compare. If you love tennis enough, then at the end of the day, it will love you back. Okay? So what is Maria is offering me in terms of this idea of tension, right? Like part of it's strange that what she missed was that challenge, that tension, that push, the drive that, right, she was familiar with. But that's something that we can work through, right, to use our gifts and talents. So these ideas, identity, vision, and tension, I think can also relate to the work that we do as coaches, right? Like how do we see ourselves, right? What's our vision for our program? What are the tensions in our program, okay? There's just one other word I want to add to this, and it's your signature. They always say spirituality is your signature. So religion is like binding, right? Religio means binding. Spirituality is breath. It's as unique as you are. So I like to think of it as your signature. Every coach has their own spirituality. They have their own signature. They should. We work with different sports. We work with different kids, right? And it's kind of fun or helpful to think about your signature. So I had a chance to kind of think a little bit more about that last weekend. I was back at Notre Dame where I went to college, and I had a chance to meet this guy who I just love, Mike Bray. Okay, Mike has said he's the loosest coach in America. He said, that's just kind of who I am. He says he has 2 rules for his team. Don't miss class. Don't give the ball away. And he said, my job is just to stay loose. He's like, because these guys are already so prepared. They already know what they're doing. They don't need me to be, on them. And you can really see Mike. Watch him, if you like college basketball, watch him. So, of course, like the next day we had a golf match. Do you know what I told every single one of my golfers? I was like, stay loose, girls, okay? Just stay loose today. I kept saying it. Kind of felt good, right? But that's his signature. That's his way, his modus operandum, okay? So, spirituality of coaching. All right. Well, I want to begin with this idea in this part that it really is an honor just to even be called coach, right? Whether or not you consider it a vocation or whether or not you see there's something spiritual about it, there is something about coaching and this title of coach that has some sort of power. I was walking down the street. I live in San Francisco, and I'm walking down my street, Fillmore, and I see this guy. We kind of lock eyes, and I'm scanning my mind, the files of like who this person is. I kind of recognize it. And I stop, I'm walking, and then I stop, and we smile, and then I walk one step past him, and I turn around, and I just say, hey, coach. And he's like, hey there. Right? It's Coach Mariucci, who worked with the 49ers. Now he's on television, right? But I felt like that was the best thing I could have said. Hey, coach, right? We fired him, the Niners fired him way too early, right? But he's still somebody that we love and respect and try to think of as a coach, okay? So I want to just share an excerpt from this book that I included in my book about the power of this title, okay? It says, if you ever doubt the significance of your role as coach, just consider, as Father John Cusick invited coaches to do at a conference entitled Coaching is Calling in Chicago 98, that apart from father, so that should be like capital Father as in Reverend Father, or sister, capital S, like a religious sister, coach is the only person in the school who is called by their title. He pointed out that students don't say teacher or principal, but the coach they call coach. Father Cusick reflected on what it was like after his ordination to suddenly have people calling him father. He felt good about the fact that people were giving him the sign of respect after all those years of preparation, but he also felt the sense of responsibility that went along with this title and this role. Likewise, when our students call us coach, this is a sign of respect, but there is also a great responsibility to be a positive influence in their life. The power of coaching, right? And I think if you saw the 30 for 30 Catholics versus Convicts, this is a quote from Tony Rice. He said it really well. He said, the Lord is my shepherd, but Lou Holtz is my coach, right? So I'd like to kind of think of that idea that we are, right? We're different than a shepherd. We have this title, right? But I also always want to give a shout out to the people, right, to the shepherd of the shepherds, to the athletic directors. This is Pat Summit with her athletic director at Tennessee. Obviously, she's no longer with us. But man, I would have loved to be in on that conversation, right, what they might have been talking about, right? I like to just think of those athletic directors that support us coaches to do what we do, right? So one of the great things about coaching is that we get to pass on life lessons, right? So whether it's you're training the eye to see, right? Or you have this sort of relationship with your student athletes. I put the word, because that's like in reference to scripture, but we have life lessons and things that hopefully we're saying or giving to our kids. This is Paul Westhead, the guru of Go. Some of you may know a little bit about him, but one thing I loved about him, he spoke to a group of coaches on the West Coast. He coached in the WNBA and the NBA. He coached in women's college at Oregon, and he coached men collegiately. His point average per game was 131 points. So he really was the guru of Go. 131 points average. Okay? So he shared with us just a couple of his words, his life lessons. All right? Ben Franklin has this saying, right? Don't put all your eggs in one basket. Westhead said, no. Put your eggs in one basket, but watch that basket, okay? I thought that was kind of interesting. Watch that basket. He said that every coach should be very good at one thing. There should be, one thing that you are really good at. And for him, it was the fast break. He said the only person that he really thought was different was Dean Smith. He said he was really good at about 5 things. Okay, he's probably right. Okay. When he worked with women, Diana Taurasi said to him, "Hey, coach, don't water it down for us. Please don't water it down. Treat us like you would anyone else." He said, "Okay." Right? And then he also added this. He said the role of the assistant coach. He said they should be a problem solver. He said too many times, assistant coach, "Hey, coach, we're not doing this. Coach, we're not boxing out. Coach, we're not doing this." He said, go back to being good at one thing as the assistant coach. Find that thing that you think we're not doing and help us do it. Right? So, spirituality of coaching. A couple of questions for us to consider. All right, so if you would look at your handout for a moment. All right, I would love for you to take a moment just to respond to these questions on identity, tension, and vision. For identity, the questions are, what do your athletes see in you? Who would your athletes say that you are? And how do you think they see themselves? For tension, what are some of the tensions in your team that you've been dealing with? What is the tension that you've had to work through recently or with? And vision, what do you help your athletes to see? What might your athletes carry from your sport to their spiritual life? Okay. So we'll just take a few moments to answer those. Okay, can I just get a show of hands real quick? How many people in here are what you would consider like on-campus coach, like meaning you work at the school that you coach at? Okay, all right. The reason I say that, if you're off campus, I always wonder how much of an opportunity you have to talk to other coaches. And one of my favorite things to do for me is just to talk to other coaches because, I don't know if it's the battle story, exchange of battle wounds and battle stories, but it's helpful to learn from other coaches and other experiences. So if you don't mind, I'd love for you to take a few moments just to share with somebody close to you a few thoughts that you wrote down in response to these questions on coaching. So if you take a few moments to do that. Yeah, with a neighbor or with the same school, it's up to you. Anyone you want to talk to. Can I talk to you?
Where'd you go to high school?
Crondelet. It's in Concord. Del Sal's the boys' school.
New Hampshire.
No, it's Sanford, Bay Area.
Oh,
Walnut
not
Creek.
Concord, New Hampshire.
No, Concord, California. Yeah, yeah. There was a movie about the football team at Del Sal.
Oh, yeah, of
151.
course.
Yeah,
Yeah,
that's
yeah.
my high school. Yeah.
I read that
Yeah.
book at a
Yeah, when the
very
game
young
stands
age.
tall.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I thought Jim Caviezel did a pretty good
He
job.
did. Yeah, he did. Yeah. Lad is way more stoic. He's a religion teacher. Yeah. Yeah. Good guy.
I
Obviously a
love
great
his. I mean, he's very simplistic. His approach.
man. Right?
But it
Yeah.
just shapes young men.
Yeah.
And,
Right. Yeah.
Man.
No, he does. He does. No, he really does. It's really important too. Yeah.
so yeah, his approach is it's incredible.
Should I have them share? Or
Yeah, no, it'll be
will?
good. Yeah.
Okay. I just never know with a
No,
group
this will be a good one.
Okay, thank you. Okay.
For sure.
Good. Thanks. I appreciate that. If not, you can call and send.
Right?
Is there any of these questions you like?
I love all of them. This is like so up my alley.
Oh, good. Oh,
Yeah.
great.
I've read
Okay.
that, the Green Book.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, it's really deep though.
Isn't it? Yeah, I know. Yeah. No, it's yeah.
That guy came,
Patrick Kelly.
yeah,
Yeah.
and spoke to the Jesuit ADs in Seattle 3 years ago.
Oh, yeah. I missed that. I know. Yeah. No,
And then Bruce Brown, the proactive coaching guy,
yeah. Oh,
he
yeah,
lives
he
in
did.
Seattle.
Yeah.
He was there.
Oh, nice. Good stuff.
Oh my gosh. I've never, and then, I mean, so nice, but I've
Yeah.
never, there are very few people, I mean, you've been around him, but he's one of those people, he walks in a room and talks and everyone listens to every word he says.
Yeah. It's a good command of an audience.
It's a
a
gift, but he's
It
not,
totally is. No,
he's not
right.
arrogant or
Yeah,
anything.
right. Name dropping or
Like
whatever,
everything,
is relevant.
yeah, and it's like calculated and
Yeah.
very precise
Yeah.
and specific, and it's
Yeah.
exactly what you needed to hear at that
Yeah.
time.
Yeah. That's a gift.
It's awesome.
That's cool.
He's the second best speaker I've ever heard.
Oh, wow.
Number one's Lou Holtz.
Oh, I know.
That's not even close.
I know. It was ridiculous. He was the coach when my freshman year orientation weekend we heard him speak.
It's
And
unbelievable.
yeah, it is. It is really good, isn't it? Yeah, I still remember what he said. Yeah. What's important now? Win. WIN. What's important now? Ask yourself that question all the time. What's important now? Well, yeah. 3 questions. Can I trust you? Do you care about me? Right? Yeah.
So his
Yeah.
grandkids go to Brebeuf.
Oh, they do. Oh,
Yeah, the
nice.
Masalias.
Okay. So it's his daughter's Beth.
Yeah.
Is that the daughter? Oh my God, I didn't know that. Okay. She's friends with my good friend.
The nicest
Yeah.
family.
Are they? I'm sure. Yeah. I guess he has like dementia.
Yes.
Like, yeah, they're like. Yeah, he might not be coming back to Notre Dame.
So he came and spoke. Marian University is a Catholic university. in
Yeah.
town. And they hosted. They have this beautiful event at Banker's
Yeah.
Life now. It's grown into this great fundraiser.
Yeah.
And he spoke, and I had seen them at an event at Brebeuf, swimming, I think. And they're like, "Oh yeah, my dad's gonna be in town."
Yeah.
And I was like, "Oh, I'm gonna be there."
Yeah. Great. Yeah.
And so she finds me as soon as it's over.
Yeah.
And like parts the Red Sea
Oh,
and takes me
nice.
straight
oh my
to her.
gosh, that's so cool.
I have a picture
Wow.
of it. It's
Yeah.
one of the highlights
I bet.
of my life. I went
Almost
to
like
Purdue,
meeting.
but I
yeah.
grew up a Notre Dame fan.
Yeah. Yeah. I know.
I mean,
Yeah.
you were there.
Yeah,
so
yeah, right.
can imagine.
Yeah. I know. Yeah, it was cool. My parents came for Junior Parents weekend, and we were like walking down this hallway, and then he was right there with his wife.
Just genuinely a great person.
Go interact.
Okay. Okay, everyone. Would love to hear from a couple of folks. Anyone want to just share a thought? Anyone want to brave the mic? Any? I mean, we could go through identity tension, something that you talked about.
Problem. One of the things that we talked about is I always felt like those first two questions, like I never have a complete grasp on how my athletes view me, and my answer of who I would say I am is drastically different than what they may say. And those first three questions would be significant. One of the things I wrote down is, should we be asking athletes those questions on a regular basis?
I absolutely agree. Just being in the classroom and being a coach, you really don't know. Like right? 30 different opinions or however many kids you're working with. Should we? I love that you just raised the question. Should we be asking the question? Someone else? With that? Thank you. You know, I work with seniors, so I hear a lot, college application process, right? Stress. And I'm always trying to gently remind them this is a good tension to have, that we're applying to college, that they will go to college. But yeah, I was just talking about the acronym WIN, what's important now. That was Coach Holt's, like drilled in my mind. What's important now? One other thought? Ah. Yeah. That's great. Do they come up with a hashtag together, or do you develop it? I mean, mm-hmm. Yep. Yeah. Thank you. Right. Okay. So this is just a fun. So I'm going to transition to a new part of the presentation. But before I do that, I like to play with ideas and just questions and just see where it goes. So I want to use Brandi Chastain as the example. She was the part of the women's, World Cup championship team, Olympian. The 99ers is what they're known as, right? And Brandi Chastain happens to coach varsity soccer at Bellarmine College Prep in San Jose. So she is their only female coach on staff, right? She's at an all-boys school. So with my students, I just said, should she coach women's or men's soccer? So I work in a co-ed classroom, and we just opened it up for debate. Why should she work with one or the other? So, right? Just take a moment. What do you think? With someone next to you, should she coach women or men? What's your response? Okay, go.
girls before?
Well, I've been around.
Nice to meet you. Yeah. I think it's just fun to think about. Right? It does matter.
Man coaching women's volleyball. It's kind of a norm around here. There's a lot of men who coach women's volleyball.
Yes, I picked up on that too. Yeah.
But not the reverse.
Right. Right.
We even considered it last year for men's volleyball. We get a woman to coach men's volleyball. It's like, think about it. Like, we got men coaching women for some cross country. Some right here.
Part of this is related. Since Title IX, there's actually fewer women coaching as head coaches. You would think there'd be more because there's more girls that play sports, but there's more men in women's coaching now. So it was part of an initiative at Play Like a Champion today just to get more women involved in coaching. So I just kind of had fun with this idea, just to think about the role of, a female coach with other female athletes, what's that like, or a female with boys, and there's definitely benefits to either side. So, okay, part 2, spirituality of coaching. All right, for this part of the presentation, I'm going to presume a couple of things are true. Okay, so having been a teacher and a coach, I'm going to make some statements that I hope that we can all kind of agree are true. One, I'm going to assume that you love sport. Okay, so you in this room love your sport, right? And that's part of why you do what you do. You love the game. I'm going to assume that working with young people is a source of joy. That's the operative word in your life, okay? That gives you joy. And that you believe participation in athletics can transform a person's life. So hopefully we're kind of on the same page with that, okay? The reason I point that out, okay, and also just those 3 words I think are so connected to spirituality: joy, love, and transformation. To me, that's exactly what spirituality, Christian spirituality, reveals. Okay, now this is our school logo, and this is where I'm coming from, but I think these are 3 challenges to what I've been saying. I think we should realize that others do not love sport, okay? So sometimes the people we work with do not love the sport that we love. Second, maybe we might not understand that we have an awesome responsibility that comes with being a coach. Maybe others might not understand that. Maybe that's something we grow into. And 3, I think a culture of sport in the country in and of itself comes into question, rightly so. I think that's fair. There's a lot about sports that are problematic, right? Morally challenging, downright unethical, okay? So let's see how this plays out. Okay, first of all, the love of sport. I just, and probably like you, I felt like my parents gave me the gift of sport. Like literally being on a swim team, that was a gift. They signed me up. What a great gift. But as I told you, swimming was my first sport, but my real first love was tennis, right? And I think when you love a sport, like think of it like a first love. Like I don't play tennis anymore, but I watch that game with like a familiarity and an affection for it that is very deep. I don't follow it like I once did. I'm not reading 2 tennis magazines anymore, but I love it just like you have that tender place for your first love. And I think that's what's really great. Like we can help our athletes love their sport, okay? Now, we can't assume we do. And I want to use this quote. Let me grab it from my high school Carondelet is all girls, but it's very unique. We're co-ed junior and senior year with De La Salle. De La Salle is in Concord, and there's a movie about the team there, the football team, in the book, When the Game Stands Tall. Okay, they have a 151-game winning streak for their football program. This is not about their football program. This is about their wrestling program. Okay, and this was a quote from the wrestling coach. Okay, and him assuming, right, like he's like, no, my athletes didn't love wrestling. He said the following: "The early years at De La Salle were challenging, as the program was still very young. We were just trying to teach kids to like the sport of wrestling. The first year, there was no wrestling culture. My team goal was to finish 3rd place in the league, and the kids thought I was out of my mind, said Halverson. It was more like teaching than training, and we were constantly motivating the kids. Now, yeah, wrestling's a really hard sport, right? And his goal wasn't even to get them to like it. To love it. It was just to like it. And here's a coach that's part of a school that only knows winning, and his goal is, hey guys, we're going to go for 3rd place, right? But he was realistic about it, right? And he developed a culture that's still strong today, okay? But my path to loving tennis was this coach that I had. And I wasn't very good, but I did go to this camp, and this coach, he drilled into us, for some reason, every night we had homework. And our homework, Michael Wayman is his name, the history of the game, right? Every night he would ask us about Jeu de Paume, which is the original name of tennis. Where's the first place that tennis, where's the Tennis Hall of Fame in Rhode Island? Basic questions. And I, being a good student, I had an advantage. My dad, who played in college, had this book by Dick Gold, the original tennis coach at Stanford, or one of the great coaches, and it had a very good history section. So I did my homework every night, and I learned about the game. And through the history of the game, I came to love the game, which is so interesting that would be part of my path. Like when you really love something, you want to know its history. So yeah, I love the game for many reasons, like I told you earlier, but I loved it so much I wanted to know its past. And I think about its future. I think women's tennis in this country is on a great trajectory. This year's US Open was dynamite. Four American women in the finals. It was awesome, right? So yeah, these shoes are really popular right now. The Stan Smiths, maybe your kids wear them. They're a great looking shoe, but long before Stan Smith, there's a shoe that came out 1 year earlier, which I opt to wear, the Rod Laver, right? That came out in 1971. The Stan Smith came out in 72. And if you know the history of the game, Rod Laver was really one of the greatest players of all time, but before the game in this modern era, right, changed, it wasn't this professional, the setup was different. So kind of just a fun way of thinking about how we love our sport, okay? So, a question for you would be, how have you gotten your athletes to love the sport you coach? Okay? So, just have a moment to think about that. Okay. The next thing I want to say is about joy. Okay, so like I said, working with young people, and I said it's a source of joy. Now, Michael Himes, the theologian, makes a distinction between joy and happiness. He says happiness is contingent kind of on many different things, many of which are fleeting. Like, I wasn't that happy today because it was pretty cold. I like warm weather, right? Or I didn't sleep well last night, so I'm not very happy about that, right? Joy is different. Joy is deeper, right? It could be I'm not necessarily happy about something, but I know I'm doing the right thing, right? Disciplining my athletes, driving the van, every night. That's not happy, but that time with the team, that is a source of joy, right? For what I do. And so I think working with young people is a source of joy. The relationships, they're funny, right? Things that happen, how they care for each other, and what they're able to do through our sport. Okay? And there's our SI girls golf team. Okay? Now, I think we have to be critical of, we have to know that what our teams can do, though, isn't always great. And this is the WCL champion, our boys soccer team. And they scored more goals in the history of the WCL than any other soccer team. So that should be great. They also got the most yellow and red cards of any team ever, right? Yeah, that's a problem. I don't think that that's, right, something that we are proud of. That's something that we needed, I always say this, discipline is love, right? And that sometimes isn't a joy at all. But I want our team, is that what we want to be known as? A great team, but a team with this kind of asterisk by it, right? So thinking about joy, right, means really paying attention to even the hard things, okay? And also, one thing, this is an image that's going to surprise you for a minute. When I coached cross country for 9 years, and you get a lot of kids. You get a lot of kids freshman year that are just trying out the sport, and after freshman year, they don't come back. You know, it's a tough sport, and it's funny because you might see those kids in the hallway, and they might not tell you that they're not running cross country anymore, and they might think you're mad at them because they're not running cross country anymore. Do you know that move where, right, they're mad at you so they avoid you? Okay, but that's 110 kids in the school building that I otherwise might not have known. So sometimes that joy was like, oh, they're avoiding me again, right? Or your athletes get mad at you, right? It takes away from that joy. However, this was a program at Bellarmine, like down in San Jose, where there's 1,600 boys, so it's a really big school, and they found that in their class of 400 kids, they thought we should be able to identify kids that faculty members know, so put a dot by that kid. And if some kids were missing dots, then they said, okay, how can we outreach to them, right? What are the trusted adults on campus? How are we connecting with these kids, or are they kind of invisible, right? So it is a source of joy that whether or not that kid's comfortable seeing me or not, by the nature of being on the faculty and being a teacher and coach, have like a moral obligation to kind of care for who they are, right? And there is some sort of relationship. So I could put a lot of dots up. I think that's a real gift of an opportunity, okay? And this is just something, right? So that discipline is love, having those rules that are established. This is from St. Louis High School, University High School. I liked some of their principles. Okay, so when have you found joy in coaching? Think of a time, experience, or person that has brought you joy. So just take a moment to quietly consider that. Okay. All right, and my last part is this idea of transformation. So, right, like here, there's a lot of good schools in the area. Why should anyone choose one of our schools, right? Why would they choose your community over another one? And I think at St. Ignatius, the reasons that they should choose us are these three things. I think these are actually, in addition to educating children, obviously, these are the most important things we do. First is Kairos, which is our senior retreat. It's profoundly countercultural. There's a lot of it in silence. Our kids will never have that much silence, right, for 3 days in their teenage years. Second is immersion. Immersion is a 2-week experience where we live in solidarity with the poor and marginalized. It's not necessarily about service, right? We're not going to places where they need us to build a home. There might be people there that can do that. We learn about the issues of poverty and justice in certain areas for about 2 full weeks. And it can really change children's minds and hearts, mine included as an immersion leader. And the third is sports. I really believe at our best, right, if we use sports as a vehicle, it can be something where we change the young people we work with. It's careful. We have to be dicey. I mean, it can be dicey. We have to be careful about that, but I think it has that ability. Okay? Again, though, I don't want to assume we do. Okay? This is a quote, one of my students in his essay. So I came to St. Ignatius because I was a rower at Notre Dame, and I wanted to coach crew. And to be honest, I was a really bad crew coach, and that was quite a learning experience. It's really fun to row. It's really not fun to drive the launch and yell right for 5 a.m. as you know. Okay, so this is from Walter, and this is what he said about his experience on crew. Sophomore year came around, so I naturally tried out for crew again, but something was missing. The teammates I had grown close to the last year had all quit, leaving me with kids I would describe as gamesmen. I decided to stick with it because I liked playing sports and I had no other sport to turn to. Then I started to notice one of the largest issues with crew. We never prayed. As Chad Evans insists in his article, all teams should and consider doing. Evans tells us to, quote, pray with our community, and that, quote, every one of our athletes suit up for competition aware of the support, love, and connection they share with the larger school and faith community they represent. I did not feel that love and support from my community, but I rather felt the simple need to win. The only thing my teammates would talk about were faster time and gold medals. They did not care about spirituality or really one another. They wanted results and scholarships. They placed greater emphasis on the outcome of the game than on the manner in which it's played. They did not care that who they left behind as long as they looked good. Sophomore year came to a close, and I decided to try to row for one more year, mainly because the seniors were gone and there was a possibility that the attitude of the team had changed. I was wrong. I rowed through the exact same atmosphere the following year. I could not find sport and spirituality anywhere on the team, so I decided junior year would be my last of rowing at SI. Right? So I guess I asked that question, what do they think of the program and the vision? And Walter offered a really honest response. It's kind of hard to read, right? And we can't assume that, right, our crew team or any other team is going to be this really inclusive and like supportive environment. Competition can really characterize it, but in a way that it could have been different, right? This is a phrase we say in rowing quite a bit. You have to get comfortable with being uncomfortable, right? Like that's part of any athlete. You kind of push your limit, right? Like you get comfortable with being uncomfortable. So for some of us, that might be praying with our team. For some of us, it might be, right, de-emphasizing the individual and promoting the spirit of the team. Okay. And then my last part on the criticism of culture and sport, right? I think it is fair. It's fair that some people are critical of sports in our society. And this was a quote from Agassi. Like I said, I read in his book, Open. Part of my discomfort with tennis has always been a nagging sense that it was meaningless. I appreciate that he said that, right? He's kind of honest about this endeavor that, you know, we love sport. And it's come up a lot recently. Like, is it just a distraction, right? And it can be. But I always push back, and I appreciate this quote from Not Just a Game. The very passion we invest in sports can transform it from a kind of mindless escape into a site of resistance. It can become an arena where the ideas of our society are not only present, but also challenged. Just as sport can reflect the dominant ideas of our society, they can also reflect struggle. The women's movement is incomplete without the mention of Billie Jean King's match against Bobby Riggs, the subject of a current movie, right? The contribution of Jackie Robinson, Martina Navratilova, Tommy Smith, and John Carlos. So even though there's a temptation to think they might be meaningless, we can see, as we do now, what they can also offer. Okay. So my question for you, and this is for you just to talk to somebody by you, which of the three assumptions or challenges resonated with you? Take a moment to discuss that.
So, so I'm jaded now, or whatever, you know, because it is the hope. But it's like, I was telling Tom, like, we're used to in this thing because we love it so much, and then like they're just 17-year-old kids who are pretty good at it, or whatever, you know. It's like, so.
It's almost like you can't grip it too tight, though. You know
I
what I mean?
wrote that down when you said it earlier.
Like, it's like you show your love for it,
Yeah.
you bring into it,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
No, I think you're right.
Yeah.
Well, and it took me kind of a long time to feel that way about golf. Like, I love watching it. I'm a huge PGA fan, but like, then I don't know. It's like any relationship, right? You kind of grow your appreciation over time. Okay, maybe from the side of the room is, well, I've actually had a couple people. Any thoughts over here? One of these questions? Yeah. Which one of these? Great. It sounds like a really good tension, honestly, right? Yes. Tension to work with, work through. Thank you. Anyone else? Sean?
I guess to kind of piggyback off that, we talked a little bit about, I think a lot of us are probably fighting I guess we talked about culture, just of club sports, and a lot of our athletes are choosing, club over high school. And I think we're all kind of in a unique position, especially being at faith-based institutions, that we, to let our athletes and kids know and families know that, our experiences are going to be, we're going to be building so much more in your kid rather than just, being a great athlete. When you see your kid as so much more than just an athlete, and how we can, show our families and our students that, an experience with our varsity programs and within our programs is going to be so much more of a formation part of your life than, going and traveling all over the country every weekend. And the culture that is right now that doesn't necessarily have our kids' best interests in mind. I think that's one of the powerful things just about this conference as it is. A lot of people have that same idea of what sports can be. I think that's kind of the essence of what this is about, and the kind of culture that we are fighting right now.
Yeah, thank you for naming that. Major tension. Yes. I always think of, we at St. Ignatius are also, we're the West Catholic Athletic League. We're with one of 7 schools, and we have 6 Catholic, 1 Christian school. And our big rival is Sacred Heart Cathedral Prep. It's the oldest rivalry west of the Mississippi. And we have this great tradition. It's called the Bruce Mahoney game. And Bill Bruce, Tom Mahoney, 2 alums that died in World War II from each school. So it's 2 out of 3, football, basketball, baseball. The trophy goes to who wins 2 out of 3. It is not inclusive of girls' sports. We're still thinking of how to do that. But the schools were originally all boys. Anyways, the Bruce Mahoney basketball game, epic game. It's played at USF's War Memorial Gym, and it went really late. And the next day in class, nobody did their homework. However, I happened to have like 4 or 5 basketball players on my team, and the girls played that night too. So I had like 8 kids. And I'm looking around. Nobody did their homework. No, but I can't believe this. Wait, Oh, look who did do their homework. The athletes themselves, right? I just want to point that out, you guys. The players of the game were the ones that did their homework, and nobody else here did, right? Speaking to that power of that team and what they can, right, through their example show. So yes, it's much different, and the club culture is not going away, right? That. Thank you. Okay, so we're going to play with another idea here. David Faraday, Golf Channel. I think he's really good. He has this thing called Rapid Fire, okay? And he interviews like a person, his guest, and it's 1 minute, and it's just forced choice, okay? So you guys can just share your response. Are we ready? Here we go, okay? Dodgers or Astros? Favorite male athlete? Favorite female athlete? Who's that? Nice. Greatest athlete of all time? Thank you. Nice. My favorite 30 for 30. Mickelson or Woods? The Olympics. Softball. Under Armour or Nike? Worst choice. Yeah. Next great sporting event you want to attend? World Series. The Masters. Steph or LeBron? Thanks, Warriors. And the best sports movie is? Nice. My favorite thing about coaching, the money, right? Oh, okay, here we go. All right, that's your rapid fire. Okay, this last part is things that you can do, practically speaking, with your team that just for faith formation. So in order to create my book, I've been talking to different schools. It took me like 3 years to write it, and I've just been collecting the ideas for probably 5 to 7 years. Everything in there is things that schools were already doing. So Bellarmine in San Jose, our school, Sacred Heart Cathedral Prep, my high school, Carondelet, lots of different schools, how they were praying with their team, 30 different ways to pray, and 30 different community building activities. That was really important to me because sometimes sports and spirituality can be too out there, right? And these are things that, again, coaches were using and doing. I do think different sports are different. So what may resonate with football would not necessarily work with maybe swimming and diving, right? Or what works with girls softball might not work with men's water polo, right? So there's different ways to do that. And hopefully some of these ideas will stick, okay? All right. And so one thing I think is helpful is I love, sports talk radio or just listening to sports on the radio. You always have your play-by-play person, but then you have your color person. And, on our staff, one of the head coach kind of has to be the play-by-play person, right? They have to do the X's and O's. But the color commentary is somebody else's gift, all right? And I think of some of the spiritual formation as kind of the color commentary of your season. Some of you might work alone, so you have to do both. I get that. But some of you might be on a staff where there's a couple people involved, and maybe this is a role that you could take, okay? So the idea that I implemented was actually stolen. This is the largest Catholic parish in the United States. It's St. Matthew's in Charlotte, North Carolina. I'm forgetting how many families it has, but it's literally a Catholic megachurch, which isn't very common to have a megachurch. That's typically more evangelical. But I mentioned them because they have a program. For every new program they have in the parish, it has to have 3 components. Okay, it has to have a spiritual component, a social component, and a service component. So, for example, there's a pinochle group that meets on Tuesdays, all right? Women's pinochle, who knew? They have to have a spiritual component, a social component, and a service in order for it to happen in the parish. And it's really vibrant. It's run by a ton of lay people. It's kind of really interesting, this church and their life. So, I will try to share examples in each 3 categories, things that you can do spiritually, things that you can do socially and service-wise, okay? The first thing I want to suggest is the idea of prayer, okay? And this is a clip. Jesuit High School in Portland, Oregon, they're technically in Beaverton, offered this about prayer.
Is, have they
I'm gonna go back because
The reason we have sports is because we believe God can be found in them. Otherwise, we wouldn't have them. The real accomplishment is, have they been able to find God in the sports that they're playing?
Bring ourselves before God, Spirit that dwells within. The kids are dying to know who they are. Prayer opens a window to not just who they're going to become, but who they are right now, their identity. And anytime you get them to be quiet, they come to know their identity a little bit more. It's a scary thing to stand on the top of a race hill and look down at gates and fly down the mountain at 40, 50 miles an hour. Even my veteran racers get pretty nervous. And so we make it about something bigger. It's not just about getting a great time. And so we pray about being connected to the mountain, about being connected to our teammates, about being connected to our coaches and our families. So we offer up our prayer tonight. We offer up a prayer for a safe game. This is where you meet God, is in your joys, in your passions, in your loves, in your deep desires.
After I say a few words and
Okay, so there's a couple of things I love that they offer for us. First of all, I love that they have a downhill ski team. I think that's pretty cool. But first of all, their philosophy, the reason we have sports is that we believe God can be found in them. The challenge, right, is can we find God in the sports we're playing? And he says a couple things about identity, right? The kids are dying to know who they are. Prayer opens a window into that. It can be scary, that silence, right, that they enter into, right? But it's about being connected. Spirituality is all about connection, right? And then it concludes with this idea of our desires, our loves, what we love, that's where God meets us. Resonates with Little's quote, feeling God's pleasure. Okay? So I always say that prayer is the starting point of any program of spiritual formation. Couple reminders for people, for you, for me, for my department in religious studies. We always say this: do not let perfect be the enemy of good. You do not have to have perfect prayer or do it right? That's not what it's about. It's the desire just to even pause and offer your heart and mind up to the Lord. Do not think it has to be like the right way of doing it. It's the desire to do it. Okay, so there's some practical ways that you can do this. This is one thing our football coach used to do, and I just used our lacrosse because they need our prayers. All right, pray with your lineup. So this one theology teacher said, you should pray for your students every day. Parents, pray for your kids every day. But teachers, pray for your students every day. It'll change your relationship with them. I thought, well, if I'm supposed to pray for my students every day, I should pray for my athletes every day. And this is a very visual and easy way to do that. You simply just sit with your lineup and you look at the names on the paper, right? And eventually, I promise you, somebody's name will pop up or stand out. They might be in need of your prayers because they might be injured or hurt, but maybe they're annoying you or something, they're challenging you, right? And you see that. It's a visual way. So that's for you, one way for you to pray, right? Or as a coaching staff, you can literally just sit with the lineup and then who do people want to pray for today? And by looking at the lineup, yeah, I'd like to pray for this person. Let's pray for this other person. One of the things we started doing and giving to our kids is just a prayer card at the beginning of the season. Okay, it's just a humble, small prayer card. Our colors are blue and red. Every other year it's blue and red. And we have a prayer, and our team motto one year was just, I run because I can, right? And it's interesting because I never really thought about where that goes with kids, but I've found over the years, this is a student in college. She said she took it with her. Kids hang it in their lockers. Parents have said it's on their bulletin board at home. So it's something tactile, and it's something that anyone can do, but it's something I give to my athletes at the beginning of every season. A humble, simple prayer card. Okay? I would invite you to consider praying separate from competition. So it's very easy, and it's just, sometimes it's just the best way because we remember it to pray before a game. But if you can, I would invite you to pray apart from games, maybe on a different day, maybe at the end of the week. And I use this simple story by this rabbi to kind of illustrate why. It's not necessarily about sport, but this is what he has to say. The young Israel was with his father in the synagogue. When his father looked over at him, Israel was gone. The father waited. The son didn't return. When the father finished his prayers, he went looking for Israel in the foyer of the synagogue, but he wasn't there. The father went outside, saw his son's footprints leading to the forest, followed them, and saw him praying beneath a tree. The father waited until his son finished his prayers and then asked, Israel, why did you come to the forest? Israel responded, to pray. His father said, but why did you need to come pray in the forest? Don't you know that God is the same everywhere? Yes, Israel replied, but I'm not. I'm not the same everywhere. Okay? So that story isn't meant to illustrate don't go to a church, or right? That's not the point of it. But it's that our kids might be different in a good way, right? When they're playing in our sport, they're relaxed, or they're with their friends, or they're comfortable, or they feel accepted. They may feel really, right, also challenged, but they might be different. I've talked a little bit about silence, right? Our kids don't really get much silence in their day. And so our sport can be a place where they're disconnected, right? Where they're not attached. And that can be a really wonderful thing. When I coach cross country every year, one kid would always ask me, Coach, why can't we listen to music, right? Some of you may get that. Like, why can't we have our iPod in, or whatever it is now? And, we said, that's not what this team is about. That's not how we conduct our practices. We're with each other. And when you find just because you're not listening to music, there are other things to hear, right? Like nature, for example, or your friends, or collective breathing, right? But we had a little bit of fun with this idea, okay? There was it's called On Being. It's on NPR, kind of some great stories. And Krista Tippett interviewed people on the practice of running as a spiritual practice. So we did something different. Okay, we said, okay, you guys, we actually want you to bring your phone or whatever it is that you're going to access, like, not music, but what am I trying to say? Podcast, thank you, today. So everyone ran, and they listened to this story of running as a spiritual practice. And we kind of had just a team discussion on what were the different things that people said. It was kind of fun, a good play on silence. But Steve Kerr does this with his team. Maybe you guys have heard this. He does the silent 10. So every time before a game, or a practice, there's always 10 minutes where the guys play without talking. There's no coaching. It's literally just the sound of squeaky shoes and a ball on the floor. And that's part of their routine, which I thought was kind of cool, right? So can we bring them to silence? Does that mean it's prayer? Not necessarily, but it opens them up, right? I love that. Okay, I'm going to move through that. I talked a little bit about this earlier with students. One way to pray is just to engage with the created world around us, like to appreciate the beauty of what we see through our sport. So I know not all your sports are out of doors, right? If you're in the volleyball gym, in the gym, you're not going to, hey, this floor is really beautiful, right? That's probably not something you're going to say. But if you are running, or, for golf, we definitely encounter some beautiful places. And I think this story is important because one of the things I committed to this season was asking my athletes every day just to pause and to behold something in nature that was beautiful. And then we would share it at the end of the week. What was something that we saw today? The reason I thought about this is at Half Moon Bay. It looks kind of like Scotland. And this is the 17th hole right here, okay? And you can see how beautiful it is. This is the Pacific Ocean, and that's like a Ritz-Carlton hotel, I think, and, unbelievably expensive. But all these people, have driven to see the Pacific Ocean and the sunset, and it's magnificent. It's literally unadulterated view of just horizon, sun going down, okay? And my friend and I are playing. We, had a good round, and we're on the 17th hole, and no joke, like the sun is literally like falling, and he's like, can we stop? I want to appreciate the sunset. This is really beautiful. And I was like, honestly, Charlie, can we just bring it in? I'm kind of done. And he's like, what? And I'm thinking, all these people have driven all this way, and here I am, like, I'm done. I'm not even going to look at it, right? I mean, that's messed up. But my point is, like, I'm glad he made me pause and appreciate it. And then I did. I just kind of slowed down, right? Take a deep breath. And yeah, it is. It's incredible what we can see. But it is a discipline. the abundance is almost too much, right? How can we pay attention to that? So never again did I do that, right? Okay. We can pray individually, but we can also pray collectively. So this is a student of mine. His name is Jack Klein, and I thought this was really cool. He's going to share with us his ritual. It's a very simple ritual of prayer that any one of your athletes can do. They don't need to be on the baseball diamond in order to do that. He just finished at Stanford, and this is him talking about his prayer ritual.
So I don't know where it started, but for me, one thing that I do that kind of helps me on a personal level, I guess you'd say, is after our team has our handshakes and high fives before the game, we have about 5 minutes to get ourselves ready, whatever you want to do, extra stretching, running. And I always do some sprints just in the outfield, just to loosen my legs up. But I always make sure I get, it's just 30 seconds, but I can go here, right on center field. I just take a knee, and I always say the same thing over, and I just say to myself, just thank you, God, for giving me another opportunity to play the game I love, which is baseball. And I always just say, keep my parents safe, keep my teammates safe, keep my friends safe, and just thank you, because it's a beautiful day. And I grab, which is tough now with the AstroTurf, but I always try to grab a little piece of grass and just take a deep breath of the grass, just because for me, when I smell like just green grass again, it reminds me of when I played this in Little League, played in high school. It's always the same grass, it's always the same field. It might be on a bigger level, but it's still ball, so you just gotta play. So I would say that's why I do it. It's small, but it keeps me kind of centered, because it can get to be a lot out here sometimes with just a lot of the stuff going on. So that's kind of my ritual, my own little thing I do every game. So yeah.
Hey, how about a Go Cats?
Go Cats!
All right, good job, Jack. We're the Wildcats, so it's a shout out to his high school. So Jack says a couple things. First, he says, I don't know where I got this. I wish he had said, my freshman coach taught me this, but that's okay. That's something that we can maybe give our athletes. But wow, I mean, who would have known something that simple? It's so easy, right? So quick, right? But it's something that he's very mindful of. So that's a ritual we can invite our students to. And they can do that individually. They might not be as comfortable doing that, collective prayer, but that's a way to enter into that. Okay, I'm going to do this at the end. Sorry. Okay. I want to just move to that second category, which is social. So we have our prayer part of our spirituality, but then I think it's important to include the larger school community in our sport if we can. So one of the things that we started was this idea, this is biblical, come and see. That's Jesus always says, come and see. Whenever, teacher, where do you live? Come and see. But one thing we decided to do, you guys might struggle with this, like a lot of our games aren't that well attended, right? And we said, hey, you guys, we're going to designate a certain faculty game. And, is freshman girls basketball this Friday. And you're going to invite your teacher, and this is a special game. And tell them, game's at 3:30. And then tell me your coach who you invited, and I'll follow up with an email. And teachers kind of like to know other teachers that are going. It's kind of like we're in high school too sometimes, right? But then we have people to sit with. And as a teacher, it feels really nice when a student asks you like that personal invitation. But I also think it's important for young people to be put in that position of asking, right? I'd like for you to come to our game, right? And follow up with that. So that was really fun. We've done that, okay? And I got this idea from Sacred Heart Cathedral Prep because the varsity football team would do this for away games, and they would invite teachers to ride on the bus with them. And then, if they wanted to stand on the field at the away game, they were welcome to do that. Like a couple of teachers talked about, the male teachers, like they were in the locker room hearing speeches. My friend who was a faculty member said it really changed my experience of those athletes, right? I respect them so much and how hard they work, something he said. So I think it is, like I said, inform faculty who's attending and have the student ask. So they decided, okay, this Friday we're playing Sarah High School, and we're going to invite these 8 teachers, right? And then I'll, as your coach, follow up with those 8 in an email, and we'll have room for them on the bus. Okay? We always conclude our season with something like a scramble. I think if you can do it, it's a great way to include faculty, counselors, administrators, somehow include them in a game. So this is our principal. He plays with us every year. So a girl invites, somebody they want to play golf with them. He comes out, and it's always 9 holes. Okay, and there's different iterations of doing this. Cross country, we did, inviting them to our home course. We took them through stretches, our pre-race, schedule, and then we had them run the course, right? And it's just super social, and then we do the cool down, so the teachers know what the athletes are doing, right? You could obviously do this with basketball, volleyball, soccer. Rowing did not work. We just put them in the launch. It would not work, okay? But allow your captain and students to lead the faculty through the routines. And we also integrate any rituals that we have. So for example, our transition from getting kind of organized to starting golf practice, we do one quote that's sport and one quote that's spirituality. So we did that same ritual. We also pray together before our matches and at other times, but parents really don't, and teachers don't get to pray with their students that often. So this was really something that was kind of a beautiful part of that experience. They were invited to pray with us. Okay. This is one of my favorite things that we do. This is for our big rivalry game. It's the jersey ceremony. So at our pep rally, the football player has already designated the faculty member that he wants to honor. They wear obviously the away jersey. They give them the away jersey for that game. And it's a big deal for the teachers. Teachers want that jersey. It's pretty incredible. It's 5,000 people at this game, and teachers who were never going to go before suddenly are like, I have to go. I'm going to have to wear this jersey, as if they're going to see them, right? But they feel this ownership or this connection. So this is great because you can't see it, but Joe gave Bobby his jersey, and I just love that photo. Bobby's wearing it underneath that jacket. I should probably change the photo so you can see it, right? But teachers, little things like that mean a lot. And just to know that your students in their athletic endeavors appreciate you, you can really get their support. Oh, there's my experience. That was awesome. That's Alex. Okay. I think it's very rich if you can invite a guest speaker into your community. This was the legendary coach, Jim Tracy. He passed away. He had ALS. As you can kind of see, he's in a wheelchair here. He came and spoke to our team, to our girls' team. So any speaker that you can invite in, have them for dinner and things like that, can really just set the tone for your season. Okay? So those are just some ideas for social, right? There's many more, obviously, but a few ideas just to get the larger community involved. Okay? And then our last category is just service and the importance of service, right? And how everybody can be great because everybody can serve. Now, this would be one of my dreams, and I think you guys could probably do it because you have a good league in the city. I wish that the MLK holiday was a national day of service. It's not a day off, but a day on, as I always say, to serve. But I wish it was led by the NFL. I think that could be kind of cool because most teams are kind of done by that point, right, with playoffs and getting ready for the Super Bowl. They could model that for us. But why couldn't our student athletes? So as a league, could you commit to a day of service? It's the schools in West Virginia. There was an athletic director who told me about this. Their entire school, all their athletic programs on one day serve the community, and they live out the corporal works of mercy, right, on that day. This was pretty cool. This is Mount Vernon High School in Washington. In order to do service, the coach said, well, what do we need in our community? Well, it's one thing to serve, but what does our school community need? And there was a lot of trash that was left in the stands after games. So his wife said, well, why don't you have your players clean up the trash after the game? And they couldn't come up with anything else, so that's what their service was. All right, so how'd that go? So the kids knew what was expected of them. And they had a really tough loss, really close loss to their rival. And, the last thing you're thinking they want to do is pick up trash. And the coach was like, hey, guys, you know what? Let's just bring it in tonight. Don't worry about it. And they said, Coach, we got it. We're good. We're going to do this. And they talked about just the process of kind of cleaning up and that ritual just kind of helped them to kind of come to grips with just the sting of the loss. And what they ended up finding out is these guys eventually worked themselves out of a job, right? Because people started putting away their trash. So kind of a good success story, right? Their needs. I always say, don't make it difficult. Somehow, if you can, let service be an extension of your sport. So we have a center for developmentally disabled people pretty close, and we always have a basketball game, which we lose every year to these folks. And we have our basketball team play against them, and it's pretty fun. And they start with the hokey pokey. That's what that picture is. But, right, our kids are already playing basketball, so why not integrate that community in a game that they all love? Janet Pomeroy Center. Yeah. Okay. Or we're actually like 12 blocks up from the Pacific, so our swim team did an ocean cleanup. I thought that was pretty cool. They have a very special relationship with the water. Some kids swim in the bay, not necessarily the ocean, but when you see the amount of trash, right, that's surrounded it, right, it makes you appreciate your pool and the importance of clean water. Okay, so, question you could consider is like, well, what are you already doing, and then what would you like to do? And you could try to figure that out in those 3 categories. Okay, so spiritual, social, service. So what? And there's our city league. Okay. So at this time, questions or comments or concerns or ideas, and we'll conclude with a prayer. We want clarification or something. Yeah. Yeah. Thanks for asking that. Well, I guess I would say the best thing was the resource would be the book, because this has all things like that. And I guess the other reason I wrote it too is because I think during the season, I always say like during golf, I never have an original thought because you're just so busy, right? And so during season, it can be hard to plan ahead. So it's good to have stuff right there. But I write a blog, and a lot of, I've written that since 2009. And the blog will have a lot of just ideas or different things that you can do. So if that's something you're interested in following, there's a connection through the website. And a lot of it is just kind of, responses to things that are going on in the world or in the world of sport. Like, for example, what have I been wanting? Have anyone heard of the movie Gleason? People heard of that movie? Steve Gleason, he's a football player with ALS. I just saw the movie, so I would blog about that and some of the ideas you could use. So some won't be quid pro quo directly related, but some would. Yeah, thank you. Anybody else? Okay. All right, well, maybe we can, yeah, thanks.
So,
Thanks, Greg. I would say it's symbiotic in the sense of, hey, our kids are praying in 1 or 2 of our classes, right? They're already prepped, they're already primed. They're going on retreats. That's part of what we offer. So then it's not going to be a stretch for them in practice to do this. And then the more they do it in practice, the more they can be even more comfortable in class. There's research on it. My brain's a little off, you guys, but I'm in a different time zone. But it's saying like actually some of the most important teachers in a Catholic school are the non-religion teachers modeling their faith. I sincerely believe that. I almost believe it, especially for men to lead, right, our boys like in modeling prayer, and it's equally important. But I see how hungry kids are. I always underestimate it, that they kind of want this invitation to be silent. They want this invitation to pray, and their hearts they're hungry for some of it. So if we have that courage or that ability, so yes, thank you for encouraging that. We're no different. Okay, well, I thought we could conclude tonight with a prayer. This is a very easy prayer that you can offer, and I'll walk us through it. Okay, so hold up maybe your right hand. Okay. Let's take a moment of silence. Right? This is called the 5-finger prayer. This is by Pope Francis. But it's going to be the 10-finger prayer in a moment. Okay, go ahead and take a moment. Just hold out your thumb. Okay? And pray for your family or friends. These are the people who are closest to you. Thank God for these people. Go ahead and index finger, your pointer finger. Okay? Pray for leaders in our school, leader in our community, for teachers. These are people who point the way. They lead us. Now extend your middle finger. This is for government and authority. Sorry. I won't say anymore. And this is your longest finger, so people really in charge here. Extend your ring finger, your 4th finger. This is your weakest finger. Pray for those who are weak or who are sick. And now extend your pinky. Pray for yourself. It's so easy to pray for our needs first. But let's remember our needs in light of all those people we love. And now on our other hand, we're going to just think about our team. So the kids that we coach, and we'll extend our thumb. This is for our teammates, for the athletes on our team. Our index finger for coaches we've had, coaches you work with. Your middle finger is for the athletic director, for the league official, for the referee. They need our prayers. Your ring finger, pray for anyone who's struggling with an injury, who's feeling broken. And lastly, pray for yourself. As a coach, you can have the humility and the wisdom to serve and to love these kids that we work with. We ask these things in your name. Amen. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ann, and good to have you back in the Hoosier State. Certainly wish you safe travels and continued blessings in your ministry. So 2 quick thoughts. One, as she made maybe about midway through that term coach that applies to all of you. It's been a long time since I was coach, but it was there at one point. And I thought of that when she said, most of my middle school coaches, unfortunately, are deceased at this point, but some of them are still alive, and I see them on occasion. The very first thing I always say to them is coach, and so that's been a long, long time ago. So that's a beloved title that you've had, and I hope you're endeared to that title. Last thing is, I'm not saying that our conference will never accept a public school into our conference. It's been up for dialogue, but right now, We are all faith-based institutions, and so nothing gives me greater joy than to know that at all of our schools, really our main goal should be to help our kids know, love, and serve Jesus Christ. That should be our main goal. And so I wish you the very best of luck. Good luck to all of you. Thanks for being with us, and safe travels.